So after Manny Pacquiao was denied a Toradol shot in his shoulder, it comes out now that Floyd Mayweather was given a retroactive exemption for a shot to rehydrate him with vitamins, etc., and fluids.
That was disputed.
That was later disputed by USADA, the governing body in terms of the drug testing.
Well, it's not the governing body.
In terms of drug testing, it was for this fight. They were contracted.
Well, they say, this is my man Doc Murray tells me this. USADA is supposed to do the testing and report to the governing body. Maybe the problems with the governing body.
The governing body is the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Right.
But USADA was, now listen, USADA is 10 times or more expensive than VADA. VADA is another testing agency that catches fighters cheating and cancels fights.
Right.
USADA never does. So either USADA is totally incompetent or they're corrupt. Like, what other conclusion? If you can draw another conclusion, tell me. It just so happens everyone they're testing is clean?
Well, whoever...
But VADA,
they said one of the conclusions you're talking about is whoever governs boxing, because the governing body determines the level of testing, example, your analysis versus blood. So USADA could be the middleman. Like they're saying, go test everybody, but we really don't want the samples to come back beyond this threshold.
USADA also would say that their presence deters people from cheating.
I bet.
But that is an absurd claim because listen,
if they come with
the obvious inference to make is if one organization never catches anyone and they're 10 times as expensive than another organization that actually catches people, then the only reason to use the more expensive organization that doesn't catch anyone is because you want to purchase a good result.
You figured that out? That's pretty good. Genius.
I now want to so Floyd's saying that I follow and have always followed the rules of Nevada and USADA, the gold standard of drug testing. That's an absurd claim that Floyd is making the gold standard of drug testing. And I will read from Thomas Hauser's article. I'm going to quote a bit, so hang with me.
I'll be with you, bro.
I'm going to quote from just one part of his article on SB Nation.
Don't read the whole damn article either.
The use of carbon isotope ratio, CIR testing, as a means of identifying the presence of synthetic testosterone in an athlete's body was developed and used in conjunction with Olympic testing since 1998, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Since the Winter Games.
Yep.
As noted earlier, USADA often declines to administer the CIR testing to boxers on grounds that it's unnecessary and too expensive. The cost is roughly $400 per test. Although VADA CEO Dr. Margaret Goodman, remember, VADA's like 10 times cheaper to use than USADA. And VADA does CIR testing, so apparently it's not too expensive for them. Anyway, Margaret Goodman notes if you do a lot of them, you can negotiate the price. So it's $400 for a CIR test at most, but if you do a lot of CIR testing, that price comes down. Okay. If VADA, which charges far less than USADA for drug testing, can afford CIR testing on every urine sample it collects from a boxer, then USADA can afford it too. Quote, if you're serious about drug testing, says Victor Conti, you can do CIR testing. Conti, of course, was involved in the whole Barry Bonds. What was that, the lab called?
You're talking about Balco.
Balco, right.
Balco.
And he had to do some time, and now he's on the other side of the fence and lending his expertise to catching people, and who would know better than how to catch people than Victor Conte? Okay. But CIR testing has not been fully utilized for Floyd Mayweather's fights. Instead, USADA has chosen to rely primarily on a testosterone to epitestosterone ratio test to determine if synthetic testosterone is in an athlete's system. So, okay, now let's talk for a second about testosterone to epitestosterone test. What is that? I'll quote from Hauser more. Testosterone and epitestosterone are naturally occurring hormones. Testosterone is performance enhancing. Epitestosterone is not. So you understand? You have them both in your body, testosterone and epitestosterone. The testosterone enhances your performance. The epitestosterone doesn't. Okay. A normal ratio, testosterone to epitestosterone, is slightly more than 1-to-1. That's like for you, me, walking around, normal ratio. Victor Conti says that one recent study of the general population, quote, placed the average, it's called TE ratio, testosterone, performance enhancing, to epitestosterone, not TE ratio, for white people at 1.2-to-1, for black people at 1.3-to-1. Turns out black people have a little more naturally occurring TE ratio, slightly higher than white people. Okay. Under WADA standards, a testosterone to epitestosterone ratio of up to 4-to-1 is acceptable. Remember, it's 1.2, 1.3-to-1 is normal. They're saying even if an athlete, of course, their testosterone levels spike and everything, we'll go up to 4-1, which is almost over three times what a normal level should be. Because that allows for any reasonable variation in an athlete's natural testosterone level. Okay, for an elite athlete, it could be high. If the ratio is above 4-1, an athlete is presumed to be doping. They're like, look, I don't care who you are. You're 4-1. We're giving you plenty of runway here.
Something wrong. I get it.
Some athletes who use synthetic testosterone game the system by administering synthetic epitestosterone to drive their ratio down beneath the permitted ceiling. See what I'm saying? So if your testosterone, your performance-enhancing testosterone is high, and you want to get the ratio to be balanced, you have to inject synthetic epitestosterone. That's the stuff that doesn't enhance performance. You got to inject that stuff.
Listen to KSP in Los Angeles.
Or you can apply epitestosterone cream. The point is you got to take synthetic epitestosterone if you're juicing to get your ratio to balance out. Okay, it's a masking device. But there's a catch. I'm quoting again. If an athlete tries to manipulate his or her TE ratio, it's difficult to balance the outcome. If an athlete uses too much epitestosterone, and the precise amount is very difficult to calibrate, Marcellus, the result can be an abnormally low TE ratio. Okay? So you're trying to mask your levels by, you're trying to mask the doping by taking synthetic epitestosterone. But it's hard to get the ratio just right.
Yep, you're going to go too far with it.
An abnormally low TE ratio is not proof of doping, says Conti. The ratio can vary for the same athlete from test to test, but an abnormally low TE ratio is a red flag. And if you're serious about testing, the next thing you do after a low TE ratio result is you administer a CIR test on the same sample, right? Now, that's the test that will catch you dead to rights, but that USADA claims is too expensive to do, even though they charge 10 times more than VADA, which does the CIR test and therefore catches people. Okay? Am I being clear so far, Mario? Are you getting all this?
I got this. Yeah, this is interesting, too.
Earlier this year, in response to a request for documents, the Nevada State Athletic Commission produced 2 lab reports listing the TE ratio on tests that the Nevada State Athletic Commission, not USADA, had overseen on Floyd Mayweather. In one instance, blood and urine samples were taken from Mayweather on August 18, 2011, prior to his fight against Victor Cruz. In another instance, blood and urine samples were taken on April 3rd, 2013, prior to his fight against Robert Guerrero. In both instances, about a month before the fight.
All right.
What do you think Mayweather's TE ratio was? Remember, normal is 1.3 to 1 it would be for Mayweather, or up to 4 to 1. But if it's lower than 1 to 1, it's a red flag in terms of maybe there's a masking agent of synthetic epitestosterone being used to bring the ratio down. His first sample was 0.8 to 1. His second sample was 0.69 to 1. In other words, Floyd Mayweather, who at the age of 38 looks just about as good as anyone's ever looked, right?
Yeah.
Has an abnormally low testosterone to epitestosterone ratio.
Maybe he gave a sample after doing the wild thing.
That's a warning flag, says Don Caitlin. If you're serious about the testing, it tells you, do a CIR test. See, like, this is very simple. If you get a really low thing, you just do a CIR test. Now, you mean to tell me that USADA didn't have $400 to do a CIR test?
Okay.
Hold on, we're not done.
You ain't done yet? Damn, I ain't never took a whole segment to do something like this.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission wasn't as knowledgeable with regards to PED testing several years ago as it is now.
What?
Commission personnel might not have understood the possible implications of a low TE ratio, but USADA officials were knowledgeable. Did USADA perform CIR testing on Mayweather's urine samples during that time period? What were the results? And if there was no CIR testing, what testosterone to epitestosterone ratio did USADA's tests show? At present, the answer to these questions are not publicly known. Note to investigators, CIR tests can be performed retroactively on frozen samples. So why wouldn't USADA be transparent and just say, this is what we did? We did the CIR test, here were the results, or we didn't do the CIR test, and then they have to explain why, with all the money they're getting paid for this fight, they couldn't do this, or for those fights even, they couldn't do CIR tests when VADA, who catches people using those same tests, is much less expensive than them?
Can I talk now?
Now, yeah. I'm sorry, we're out of time.
I heard, well, thankfully, I got to hear this before when you first told me about the article this morning where we were prepping for Sports Nation. Hearing it once again, Max, well stated. If I was on the other side of the courtroom, I'll be sitting there saying, hey, man, let's take about 10 minutes, me and my lawyer, let's talk this out. But then I would come back and ask this, Max. One is like an overview, a little overture, and then one is specific. My first, when you're talking about drug
Can I
testing.
ask you something first?
Yeah.
Is USADA the gold standard for testing? That's what Floyd claimed.
Not by your claim, not by what you just laid out.
They never catch anyone.
That roadmap didn't sound like a gold standard.
They're the gold standard for getting away with stuff, apparently, because they never catch anyone. But go ahead.
Well, I don't know. Does VADA catch a lot of people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, VADA catches people and cancels fights, by the way.
Sounds like a gold standard. Okay.
Yeah.
I would ask this in overview, macro perspective. You ready for this? Yeah. Is it the point of any athlete to prove they're not cheating, or the point of any testing to find and prove that you are cheating?
In Floyd Mayweather's case.
Oh!
That
was strong!
In Floyd Mayweather's case.
I mean, strong.
Hold on. In Floyd Mayweather's case, he brought up testing because he didn't believe what he was seeing from Pacquiao was natural 5-6 years ago.
I remember that.
And when that came up, I clearly sided with Floyd because I said at the time, look, Barry Bonds didn't have to start juicing when he saw McGuire and Sosa coming up.
No.
He could have said, hey, guys, or he could have said, let's none of us juice. Let's make stricter guidelines for testing.
For everybody.
But Bonds went in another direction. It's harder with a big union to try to make change. And Bonds said, well, if they're going to juice, I'm going to juice. I applauded Floyd's stance because I thought, no, if he thinks people are juicing, fine. Make sure it's a level playing field. But now come to find out that, in fact, he used the easier one to game system of testing rather than the one that would actually catch people.
Okay, well,
so that seems like he's inviting testing, so that changes the equation for your question.
I hear you. Your answer touched what I said, but it didn't hug it. It didn't embrace it. But I will let you off on this. I want to go here.
He championed cleaning up the sport through testing, so it's different than what you're saying. That's what I'm saying.
I get that. What I would say to follow up then is, if this is the situation that you presented, that Floyd, you know what, you're picking the lesser of the two evils because it's easier for you. Answer this, Max. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Floyd's sitting there right now, and he's like, am I the culprit? Am I the problem? Or is what is giving this test, the governing body, USADA, the corruption of boxing, which allows – think about it. NFL doesn't allow you to pick where you want to get tested, which governing body. Boxing allows it. So is the corruption starting with Floyd, or is it starting with boxing and dripping on to Floyd?
Right. Boxing is
was almost as strong.
Boxing has always been a series of independent contractors doing business together for their own short-term interest, right? And Al Heyman with the PBC is trying to change that in some respects. But certainly Floyd uses his leverage as the money man to get his way in negotiations. The question then becomes, what way does he want to have it?
Okay.
Pacquiao, once his side found out that there would be testing for this fight, you know what testing body they suggested?
VADA.
They said VADA. Okay. Let's make sure it's clean.
Now, my last
and Mayweather's side said, no, we want to pay 10 times as much to the organization that doesn't do the test that catches people.
Okay.
And this is after Floyd had 2 samples come in with abnormally low red flag TE ratio tests that would suggest you should do the test that catches people.
All right. Now, you read an essay. Now, here's my final one.
And then Floyd turns around and said, it's the gold standard, USADA.
Now, here we go, Max. What you're talking about is some gamesmanship ethics, maybe. But in conclusion, if I'm Floyd's lawyer, why he will get off and why the suspicion won't grow that loud is this. If you are showing me that the corruption is higher than me, and you're showing me that I have never been caught, then why are you talking about me? Stop the corruption and catch me. Floyd walks out the courtroom all you're going to say is, but I know you've done something.
No. Who's the corruption?
Whoever is giving
Floyd,
these tests.
There's no one higher than Floyd.
Yes, there is.
No, Floyd generates the money. Who's higher than Floyd?
Hold on, but someone's giving him a test. Someone locks him into a room and says, you're giving me your test.
He decides who he hires, which independent contractor, USADA or VADA, he hires.
Why do you give him that elective option?
He then pays them essentially to run the test.
I get Max, but why does boxing give him that elective option?
What do you mean when you say boxing? To whom are you referring? inferring?
The governing body, whoever is
The
saying
Nevada State Athletic Commission?
Or Nevada is the State Athletic Commission. Who says VADA or says USADA? Whoever lets you
there
go
are
either
those who would argue, or one might infer, that Floyd has undue influence on the Nevada State Athletic
Commission.
Commission.
Because Manny had it that way before. And Manny Pacquiao wanted to go to VADA, so that means he wasn't with VADA at first, correct?
No,
so that means
what are you talking about now?
Floyd.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission or the testing body?
Floyd wasn't the only boxer who's chosen USADA. Because guess what? There are other boxers who are in USADA, and you're saying even Pacquiao wanted to go to VADA.
Yeah, but
so that means it's been loose restrictions before, correct?
Look, I think it's fair to infer that if a fighter insists on USADA rather than VADA, they're trying to get away with something. If one body doesn't do the test that catches you,
hold on, Max,
and the other does, and the other's cheaper, why would you spend more?
Not to play ring around the rosies,
catch you.
But then why doesn't boxing just make it all
boxing? When you say
Nevada
boxing,
State,
this is the problem. I will tell you why.
Why?
This is the problem with when people say boxing. When you say, why doesn't football do something? You don't mean football. You mean the NFL.
Yeah.
When you say, why doesn't basketball do something? You mean the NBA. When you say, why doesn't MMA do something? You mean the UFC. When you say, you mean MLB. There is no governing body in boxing or league or tour in boxing that is perceived as more legitimate than the others.
So who enforces
under
this?
Which it depends. It's local. If you fight in Nevada, it's under the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Right. So let's stay there because most of his fights are, if not all,
and who lives in Nevada and has enormous influence with the commission?
Floyd.
Okay.
Yeah, but
so who's bigger than Floyd?
But Floyd can't do a boxing match by himself. Right. There are other people who are complicit in promotion.
What do you infer from this article? What's your conclusion from all of this?
That it sounds like
Floyd is cheating to you or not?
No.
Okay.
You do this a lot though. You do this with Pujols. You do this with Josie Bats, Jose Bautista. You get close and you're saying, well, there's no other way for them to go, so they must be cheating.
No.
And all I'm saying is, I think that if Floyd is really cheating, catch me, one.
Yeah.
Because I don't like to allege anybody unless you got caught. But two, if you did get caught, then if the corruption or the collusion is at a different level, we got to go attack that. Mm-hmm. And then give him no option of USADA.
When you say we, who's pulling the strings?
Floyd, and it sounds like you said Pacquiao before, and it sounds like maybe other boxers before. Whoever's used
but we're not talking about those instances. We're talking about this instance.
Yeah,
this story's about this instance.
Yeah, but this doesn't mean that you're guilty or you have a bad sample because you came back with you ever seen a Plan B sample? You ever seen a sample C?
Why not use VADA, do you think?
I don't know. I really don't know. That to me doesn't make you go guilty.
We have ESPN senior NFL and fantasy insider.
Why don't you ask Floyd? You see him all the time.
KC Joyner.
Me too. I'm like
coming up. Max and Marcellus, ESPN LA. Max and Marcellus, ESPN LA, 7:10 a.m. on your dial.
Max was just apologizing for that last argument.
That's not exactly
destroyed you.
That's not at all what happened. In fact, Marcellus was here getting a master's degree, a PhD in this stuff.
A PED in this stuff.
That's right.
A PED.
Now I hope you understand.
Yeah. Interesting.
The point is, in boxing,
your sport is messed
up. In boxing, in this case, Floyd asked for more testing, but the testing he chose was a test that was easy to get.
He asked for more of less.
Right. So in other words, it gives the appearance of looking to test, but really not as much. Okay.
Strong thesis there.
Now, we'll get back to this a little bit later. We'll take calls, 877-710-ESPN. But right now on the Morongo Casino Resort hotline, I mean, this game's about to start. Is this game starting? Where are we in all this?
We've got 13 minutes, bro. They're doing that little, that montage coming up.
Nice. Let's get back to Floyd.
Yeah, let's do it.
Max and Marcellus. Max and Marcellus, ESPN LA, 7:10 a.m. on your dial, 3 to 7 p.m. weekdays. When last talking about the Floyd Mayweather situation with the drug testing body, USADA, Marcellus? It seemed that you were having some difficulty understanding the way boxing,
I had no difficulty understanding
the way boxing is organized. Now,
no, not at all.
Now,
not true.
You said that Floyd is not, if there's corruption here, it's not Floyd because he's submitting to the same rules everyone else is. It seems that that your presumption is that there is always extra testing involved in boxing. In fact, that's not the case.
Wrong. I didn't say that. I didn't even assume that.
In fact, that's not the case. In fact, what happens is there's a very low level of testing that's done by state commissions.
Right.
As a result, several years ago, Floyd Mayweather looked at Manny Pacquiao and said, there must be rules that are too easy to get around because I'm suspicious of that guy. I want further testing. He then said he wanted to use USADA. By the time Manny Pacquiao came around to Floyd's way of thinking and says, yes, we should do further testing, Manny Pacquiao's side said, let's use VADA. USADA doesn't catch anyone and is more expensive to do. VADA catches people and is less expensive to do. And so I said it's an inference that people have made and that Thomas Hauser seems to be making in his article on SB Nation, that the reason you would take a more insist on testing and then take a much more expensive test that's much easier to get around is because you're purchasing a result, essentially.
Wrong. Well, the problem with your connective logic is this, Max. If you're going to make the assumption in logic that if you take the easier testing, that must imply that you're cheating, then those who are not tested should already be presumed guilty. And that's a complete farce, because if in any situation, if you're not tested, doesn't mean you're doing it. And in a situation where you're tested but there are low thresholds, doesn't mean you're doing it. So
in this case,
that's the problem I have.
Let's take the specifics of this case. When you have an abnormal TE ratio, the CIR test can indicate much more conclusively if you're actually taking a synthetic epitestosterone to balance the ratio. The CIR test can be purchased for about $400,
right?
And you can do the CIR test for about $400. And the much cheaper testing agency, VADA, which actually catches people, administers a CIR test, and it is unknown whether USADA did in Floyd's case and anyway won't make that information public. Why wouldn't they make that information public? And if they haven't done it, why wouldn't they do it? They claim sometimes it's too expensive, but they're getting paid a lot more than VADA.
Okay, like my pastor always says, the truth is simple, lies are complex. These are complex responses you're giving me lets me know that it's not that simple. Therefore, you haven't caught Floyd yet. You haven't caught Floyd yet. Here's the thing, Max. Floyd Mayweather, in this situation, I'm laughing at this. That because you're trying to say he took the easy road, that means it's the guilty road. And I still don't know how you could.
No, what I'm saying is, why won't they do CIR tests?
Well, let me ask you the question.
Why would he choose?
Well, the average black man is a 1.3, right? Mm-hmm. Average white man's a 1.2. Yeah. Do you know the range for the average? Do you know the range? So if you're a very
you mean median as opposed to mean?
Yeah. What's the range?
I don't know the range.
Exactly. So you're not as versed in this as you think you are.
Hold on. I'm just quoting from Hauser's article.
I got you, but I'm saying is the range 0.8? Could a normal black man be a 0.8?
Apparently not.
Well, apparently, but not sure.
What they're saying is, what the testing experts are saying is, in and of itself, it doesn't prove anything. Right. But what a 0.8 or a 0.69 does raise is a red flag that would then lead you to say, well, okay, here's the way to find out what's going on. Let's take a CIR test. That is something that VADA routinely administers in these cases, and that USADA does not, claiming it's too expensive, even though USADA is much more expensive to test with than VADA.
So is that on Floyd? But if I'm Floyd and I haven't got caught, now you want me to take a secondary test to prove that your test was valid?
If you're insisting on tests and you have low TE ratios, why wouldn't you insist on the test that would vindicate you if, in fact, there's no synthetic epitestosterone by insisting on the VADA test? Why insist on the body that doesn't do the CIR test?
Look, I got low iron. I mean, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into things that I don't know if you didn't catch me on the first one. So why would I go through door number 2 if you ain't even forced me to do door number 1? I haven't got found guilty.
If you're guilty, you wouldn't.
If I'm innocent, I wouldn't, because I have nothing to prove to you. I'm innocent.
Then why would you insist on tests if you have nothing
because
to prove?
He knew the other person was certainly guilty in his eyes. Pacquiao.
Yeah, but I don't understand. Your logic is so twisted. I don't even understand what you're saying anymore.
Well, that's your fault. All right. I graduated in 4 years.
Top 10 cheesy game show, plus the remix with Big Z Smalls. Coming up, Max and Marcellus.
Oregon brings an offense averaging over 40 points per game into the Coliseum to face the red-hot USC Trojans. Coverage begins Saturday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio, presented by Dr. Pepper.